December 1999. It's the end of the world, folks. The last month before Y2K destroys us all. The infrastructure is going to collapse. It's the end of the world as we know it. How did I spend my last month? I read some books. Pretty decent amount, I think. So let's talk about that, because what else is there to talk about? The world's going to end. This is it. This is the last of it. Damn computers. Going to destroy everything. Well, let's jump in to the books that I read in December of 1999. And the first one was Angel, City of, by Nancy Holder. And this is just a novelization of the pilot episode of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer spin-off, Angel. So Angel has moved to Los Angeles, opened up a private detective agency. Cordelia has moved to Los Angeles and is working as his assistant. He meets, I can't remember the dude's name, who has visions, and to guide Angel. And I can't remember if, what's his name, Wesley Wyndham Price shows up in the first episode. No, I think he shows up later. Doyle is the guy with the visions. He's a demon. I think Wesley shows up after Doyle dies. Spoilers. I may have said that in the wrong direction, wrong order. But anyway, it's a novelization of a TV episode. So it's not bad. If you're a fan of Angel, it's entertaining enough. Next up, we have Pay the Devil by Jack Higgins. I absolutely have this book. Try to keep that glare off of it. And this book, if you keep watching these, well, I was going to say if you keep watching these videos, but the world's going to end, so I assume there's no more videos after this. But I did read this many, many times. What you have, I'm going to go ahead and read the back of it. After the surrender at Appomattox, Confederate Colonel Clay Fitzgerald escapes to Ireland, where his grandfather has left him an estate. But Ireland is caught in a civil war of its own. The endless struggle between the wealthy landlords and the impoverished tenant farmers has sparked the Fenian Rebellion. Having just fought and lost a terrible war, Clay wants to avoid this coming conflict. But after witnessing the atrocities that the nobles visit upon their own people, Clay is unable to stand by. Taking the guise of a legendary night-riding outlaw, he joins the fight against the landlords and wages a rebellion of his own. So basically, it's an Irish version of Zorro. Because you have a landowner who has a disguise and is helping the downtrodden. But it's got the great Jack Higgins prose, which means it doesn't get bogged down like many thrillers and espionage books do. And I really like the characters. I think maybe it was reading this that made me realize that a lot of hero characters in fiction are former Confederate soldiers. Outlaw Josie Wales, John Carter of Mars, this guy, that's 3. I think Jonah Hex. So there's 4 for you. There's probably more that I don't know of. But I thought that was interesting that there are some ex-Confederate soldiers turned heroes. But I really, really love this book. And so you'll see it pop up again and again. And then that was followed by Pomegranates Full and Fine by Don Basingthwaite. And this is a World of Darkness Vampire the Masquerade book. The main character this is where I have notes, Tango, who is going to Toronto to visit her friend who is planning a high summer party, I think is what it's called. But when she gets there, her friend is missing. I think her friend's name is Mariley. They're all vampires. And so she's searching for her missing friend and comes across a group of Sabbat vampires who are on a murder spree. So in Vampire the Masquerade, for anyone who's unfamiliar with it, based on a role-playing game, there are different factions of vampires. So it's kind of like your character class and things in D&D. You pick when you're making your character in the game, you pick a faction and there's certain attributes to those factions. And there's like 9 of them or something. Well, the Sabbat vampires are basically anarchist vampires, except that's not the best term to use because there are anarchs, but they don't believe in the rules. Essentially, they are more on the side of the antediluvians, who are the super overarching bad guys. They want to tear down the existing power structure of the vampires. So Tango, looking for her friend, comes up against these crazy vampires, and not a bad book if you're into the Vampire the Masquerade stuff. Excuse me. By the way, I want to point out I did not have to look up Angel City of because I knew it was the novelization, and I've seen the pilot many, many times. But that brings us to book 4, Buffy the Vampire Slayer: The Willow Files, Volume 1, by Yvonne Navarro. And I did have to look this up simply to see which 3 episodes are novelizationed in this book. And they are, how am I going to, I'll go one at a time with my description of what they are. But basically, The Willow Files, Volume 1, it's a novelization of 3 episodes that kind of focus on Willow. And so the first one is I, Robot, You, Jane, which is from season 1. And essentially, there's a demon that way back in the day was imprisoned in a book. Now, in the modern day, Sunnydale, Willow is helping Giles scan books into the computer. And so she scans this book. The writing disappears as she scans it. And essentially now the demon is trapped inside inside the computer and in the internet, and takes on this persona that befriends and kind of seduces Willow over the internet while his lackeys are building a robot body that he can be transferred into, and then he'll be physical again. Early days for Willow. The next episode was Phases, which I believe is season 2, and this is when Willow has started dating Oz, played by Seth Green. And this is when we find out that Oz is a werewolf. And I always he's a very laconic, I believe would be the term, character. And essentially, when people, he says he's a werewolf, someone will say, long story, and he's just like, got bit. But this is where we find out there's a werewolf hunter, has come to town looking for this werewolf. We found out that Oz is the werewolf, but not necessarily the werewolf that the hunter is after. But it's about his relationship with Willow and blah, blah, blah. And then the last one is Dead Man's Party. It's the first episode of season 3. At the end of season 2, Buffy has essentially run away from Sunnydale, moved to, or not the first episode, I'm sorry, because the first episode is when she's run away. She's in Los Angeles. But this is when she comes back to Sunnydale, and the Dead Man's Party part comes from, there's a sort of a homecoming party for Buffy, and this mask makes zombies, and so they're fighting zombies. But it's mainly about the interpersonal relationships between Buffy and her friends and her mother, and dealing with the fact that she ran away after the events of season 2. So, Yvonne Navarro, great writer, and again, novelizations. I love the Buffy show, so I enjoy reading these. There you go. That was a lot. But next up, All Quiet on the Western Front by Eric Maria Remarque. I guess that's how you would say his name. Obviously, famous story about a soldier, 20 years old, I believe, a German soldier in World War I. And it basically covers the horrors of war, what this soldier and his comrades go through. And, it's philosophical, it's horrifying. I did look it up. And it says on the book cover that I saw, the greatest war novel of all time. It was recently, relatively speaking, made into a Netflix movie. And really a really, really good book. Not a huge, definitely not a huge war movie fan. There are some that I enjoy. I don't go back to them very often. But generally, I'm not looking for war movies or war novels. But this is a fantastic book. Next up, we have Trace, When Elephants Forget. And I forgot to read the back of this book before I started recording. I'll read this one too, I guess. It says Devlin Tracy didn't love New York. As far as Trace was concerned, New York was a lousy place to visit and an even worse place to make a living. But the insurance company that employed him had sent him to Manhattan to check out a death in a family that made the mafia look like the Waltons. And to add an extra twist of trouble, Trace's girlfriend Chico came along to keep him on the straight and narrow while she explored the far out kicks of the city. In a town where every woman seemed available at the price of peril, where a blizzard of cocaine was burying users and pushers alike, and where the answer to the most polite question was a quick kick in the teeth, the freest freelance investigator of them all found the Big Apple pure poison when he cut to the core of a crime that nobody wanted to solve. All right, so Trace is an insurance investigator, sort of a reluctant one. He takes cases when he has to. His girlfriend Chico is a stripper. And yeah, so he's obviously goes to New York to see if the insurance company needs to pay out on a claim. I really dig these books. They're a lot of fun, reminiscent of like the Fletch books to me. And part of the series. I'm missing one or two from the series, but I do have some of them, and they're well worth reading. Then we have Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Power of Persuasion by Elizabeth Massey. Getting a lot of great authors doing Buffy the Vampire Slayer stuff. So Power of Persuasion is in Sunnydale. All of a sudden, like all the females in Sunnydale become super empowered, super pushing like the feminist agenda, for lack of a better way to put it. And at the same time, all of the males are becoming very meek and downtrodden. So it's, instead of equality, we have a complete shift essentially in the power structure. A lot of air quotes in this. And some men, high school students, whatever, are ending up dead. Buffy's got to figure out what the hell's going on. Elizabeth Massey, fantastic author, and a good Buffy book. Then we have a book I wish I had at the moment. I'll have it eventually. Riptide by Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child. And this is a non-Pendergast book. Essentially, it's a group of people looking for a treasure, a pirate treasure, that's allegedly in this island that's filled with these tunnels and passages that fill with water at different times. Very dangerous. People don't come back. I think I remember the twist, for lack of a better term. But a very great rollicking adventure. Preston and Child are just fantastic together. They always write, I think, great characters and interesting stories. And as much as I love Pendergast, I really enjoy their sort of standalone books as well. Then we have Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Obsidian Fate by Diana G. Gallagher. Excuse me. And in this one, a storm, I believe, uncovers an ancient Spanish expedition, and there's this fancy mirror, but it disappears, as well as the history teacher that found it. And it turns out it's a totem for, I keep saying for lack of a better term, totem for this Egyptian, or pardon me, Aztec god. And it can show you, if you look into it, it can show you how you're going to die, but it also will allow the Aztec god to control you as he tries to rebuild his power and make himself manifest. So, of course, Buffy and the Scoobies have to figure all this out and fight the bad guys. Another fun Buffy book. All right, only 3 more books to go before the world will be over because of Y2K. It's very sad. So, Skylar by Gregory MacDonald. I've talked about this many times. Skylar, this country boy, his Yankee cousin has come down south to visit him. There's a murder. Skylar's implicated. I believe it's Skylar who's implicated in this one. So he's got to figure it out. And he's dragging his Yankee cousin along with him. It's a lot of fun. This is the author of the Fletch series. Second mention for Fletch this video. And I thought it was a lot of fun. I like the character of Skylar. And it's a good book. Obviously, I've read it multiple times. But now, the penultimate book for December of 1999. A book I have read many, many, many times. A book you're going to hear about. You know, if the world hadn't ended and I could keep this video series going, you'd hear about this book many more times. That is A Prayer for the Dying by Jack Higgins. I need a non-movie cover for this book, but I've had this copy for so long. So regular viewers will have heard me talk about this. It's about Martin Fallon, who's in the Irish Republican Army, but something goes wrong on one of his missions, and he decides to quit. He's asked to do one last job. He's essentially blackmailed into it. He does it, but it's witnessed by a Catholic priest, and so it was a mob hit. And so to protect the priest, Martin Fallon goes and confesses, goes to the confessional, confesses, so the priest can't tell anyone, but the mob guys don't think that's good enough. They're going to go after the priest and his blind niece. Martin Fallon is going to protect them. I love the movie. I love the book even more. I've read it many, many. It's a comfort book for me. Absolutely fantastic. And then finally, the last book that I read in December of 1999. The last book I read before the end of the world. Sorry, folks. I have nothing to do with Y2K. It's not my fault. But The Man with the Getaway Face by Richard Stark. A Parker novel. This is the second in the series. And in this book, takes place right after the events of the very first book, The Hunter. The mob, not happy with Parker, so he goes and gets plastic surgery to change his face. I think that might have something to do with the title. Meanwhile, so he's got to get away from the mob, get his plastic surgery, but then there's an armored car, I think it is, that he also wants to heist. Yes, an armored car. So not only is he sort of on the run from the mob until he can get his plastic surgery, but then he's got to set up this heist. But then there's always a femme fatale. But it's just great, great crime fiction. Every Parker book I've read has been outstanding. And one of these days, I'm going to go back and read through this series. Maybe do a video series as I read each book. We'll see. Or I'll just read them when I feel like it and do a regular review. But anyway, The Man with the Getaway Face by Richard Stark. Absolutely fantastic book. And that was the end of 1999. Excuse me. So, question for this video. I've probably asked this before, so maybe I can mix it up a little bit. Do you have a comfort book or books? Is there a book or books that you have read many, many, many times? Um, I would say A Prayer for the Dying is the book I have probably read the most. And I have mentioned before that, and I think probably very close to this time now, I started rereading A Prayer for the Dying and Pay the Devil in overlapping months, if that makes sense. Like, let's say January, I would read A Prayer for the Dying. February, I'd read Pay the Devil. March, I would read A Prayer for the Dying. April, I would read Pay the Devil, etc. Because I love both books so much, and A Prayer for the Dying is just one of my favorite books. I can, if I absolutely have no idea what I'm in the mood for, I know I can pick that up and enjoy it. The Light at the End, for a time, was the book I had read the most, I think. It was my favorite horror novel. I do need to read, it's been a long time, I need to reread that. But definitely, I'd say A Prayer for the Dying has to be the one I've read the most and is absolutely a comfort book for me. What about you? Let me know in the comments below. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here on my channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. All the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is at Ronan5757. My Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, and fuzzy animals, is Eric Smith5757. If you're on Blue Sky, I am at EL Smith. And that is all I have for you this week. So until next week, even though the world's going to end, read more books.